state where a one-bedroom condo in Miami costs more than a mansion in Ohio, where beach access means either a seven-figure mortgage or sharing sand with 50,000 spring breakers. The tourism boards sell you the dream: palm trees, perfect weather, coastal living. What they don't tell you is that dream now costs $450,000 for a teardown in a flood zone. But here's what the travel influencers and real estate industrial complex won't admit: there's another Florida, not the Instagram Florida, not the retirement brochure Florida, the Florida where waterfront living costs less than a used pickup truck, where you can walk to natural springs instead of waiting in line at Disney, where your neighbors are mullet fishermen and not hedge fund managers. We found 7 communities where the median home price sits between $140,000 and $285,000. Real towns with actual Gulf access, river frontage, lake views, and more natural beauty than the overpriced tourist traps could ever manufacture. Places where Florida living doesn't require a trust fund or a willingness to live in a HOA-managed beige box. The catch: these towns committed the ultimate Florida sin. They stayed real. No luxury condos, no TikTok viral moments, no Whole Foods within 60 miles. They're the places tourists drive through on their way to somewhere better, never realizing they just passed affordable paradise. This is the countdown nobody asked for, but everyone searching affordable Florida desperately needs. 7 communities where you can actually afford the Florida dream, as long as you're willing to redefine what that dream looks like. From forgotten river towns with Victorian bones to Gulf Coast fishing villages where the biggest decision is mullet or redfish, we're going off the beaten path and into the Florida that real people can actually afford. Hit that like button if you're tired of being priced out of paradise. Let's find your Florida loophole. Where are we starting? Number 7, a river town that time, tourists, and economic development completely forgo. Number 7, Palatka, the river town time forgot. Palatka sits on the St. Johns River about an hour south of Jacksonville, and the first thing you notice is the architecture. Victorian homes, historic downtown blocks, riverfront views that would cost millions in any coastal market that matters. The second thing you notice is how quiet it is. Not peaceful quiet, forgotten quiet. The median home price in Palatka is $180,000. That's what a parking space costs in Miami Beach. For that money, you're getting actual square footage, sometimes riverfront access, and a town that peaked economically somewhere around 1925 and has been coasting on architectural dignity ever since. Here's the pivot: Palatka isn't a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. It's a town that got passed by when Interstate 95 rerouted traffic away from the river, when the paper mills downsized, when younger generations left for Jacksonville and never looked back. What remains is affordable because there's no economic engine demanding higher prices. The jobs left, the industry left, the property values stayed frozen in time. Zillow data shows homes sitting on the market for an average of 87 days. That's not normal for Florida in 2024, where decent properties get snatched up in weeks. It tells you everything about demand. People aren't fighting to get into Palatka. They're fighting to leave or holding on because they can't afford to go anywhere else. The cost of living here runs about 18% below the Florida average, according to recent economic data. Groceries, utilities, gas, it all costs less when nobody's competing for it. The trade-off is what you're giving up. The nearest Target is in Orange Park, 30 minutes away. Downtown has a few local spots, antique shops that open when they feel like it, a handful of restaurants that close by 8 p.m. If you need real shopping, real medical care, real anything, you're driving to Jacksonville. The St. Johns River is legitimately beautiful, wide, slow-moving, lined with cypress trees and Spanish moss. You can kayak, fish, watch the occasional manatee drift by. It's the Florida nature tourism sells, except here you can own a piece of riverfront for less than a year's rent in Tampa. One local put it perfectly: my view costs $1 million anywhere else. My paycheck looks like 1953. You tell me which one you can eat. The drivers in Palatka treat stop signs like friendly suggestions from a distant acquaintance. I watched someone execute a 3-point turn in the middle of a bridge, not because they were lost, but because they remembered they needed to pick up bait at the dock they just passed. Nobody honked. Nobody even looked surprised. In a town where nothing happens quickly, traffic laws are more like traffic guidelines, and everyone's got time to wait. The weather is classic North Florida. Hot, humid summers where your AC becomes a second mortgage. Mild mild winters that occasionally dip into the 30s, and remind you this isn't the tropics. Hurricane risk is lower than coastal markets, but you're still in Florida. Insurance costs are climbing everywhere in the state, and Palatka isn't exempt. Picture this: early morning on the Palatka Riverwalk, sun rising over the water, smell of river mud and coffee from the one shop that opens before 9 a.m., herons hunting in the shallows. Your mortgage payment is less than what your friends pay for parking in Miami. The trade-off? The only person you'll see before 10 a.m. is the guy who's been fishing this spot since 1987, and he's not interested in small talk. Palatka works if you're remote, retired, or willing to commute to Jacksonville for work. It doesn't work if you need nightlife, career advancement, or the sense that your town has a future beyond preserving its past. But if you thought Palatka was quiet, wait until you see what happens when a town's biggest attraction is something you have to leave town to access. Number 6. Chiefland, the Springs Gateway Nobody Markets. From Palatka, we head west and slightly north into Levy County, into a town that exists almost entirely as an access point to something better. Chiefland, population 2,200, sits a few miles from Manatee Springs State Park and the Suwannee River. The town's entire economic identity is, we're near pretty things, which is both its selling point and its fundamental limitation. Median home price here is $160,000. That's less than a down payment in Sarasota for a house with land, actual Florida nature within biking distance, and a cost of living that runs about 15% below the state average. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, Chiefland's population has barely moved in 20 years. It's not growing, it's not shrinking, it's just existing in a kind of economic stasis where nothing gets worse but nothing gets better either. Here's what you're actually buying into. Chiefland has a Walmart, a Winn-Dixie, a handful of local diners, and a Dollar General. That's the entire commercial infrastructure. The nearest Target, the nearest real shopping, the nearest anything beyond basic survival supplies is Gainesville, 45 minutes away. You want a coffee shop that stays open past 2 p.m.? Gainesville. The one local coffee spot closes at 2 p.m. sharp, which is either charming or a personal attack depending on your caffeine dependency. Your afternoon options are gas station cappuccino that tastes like regret or learning to appreciate the subtle notes of Folgers you make at home. Most people choose regret. You want a job that isn't retail, healthcare, or manual labor? Gainesville. You want culture, arts, restaurants that serve something other than fried fish? You're driving. But here's the thing, nobody tells you about these gateway towns. The natural beauty they're gateways to is legitimately spectacular. Manatee Springs pumps out 100 million gallons of crystal clear water daily. You can swim, snorkel, kayak, watch manatees in winter. The Suwannee River is one of the last wild rivers in Florida, lined with cypress and limestone springs. These are the postcards Florida tourism sells, except here you don't pay tourist prices to access them. Redfin data shows the average days on market in Chiefland sits around 76 days. Again, not normal for a state where inventory gets devoured. It signals low demand, limited buyer competition, and a market where sellers can't command premium prices because there's nobody bidding against you. If you're a buyer, that's leverage. If you're a seller trying to escape, that's a problem. The economy here runs on tourism spillover. People passing through to the springs, stopping for gas and groceries. There's some agriculture, some service industry work, but according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median household income in Levy County is $44,000. That's 30% below the Florida median. You're trading affordability for earning potential, and that math only works if you're bringing income from elsewhere. Employment options are thin: the local hospital, a few schools, retail, restaurants. If you need a career with advancement potential, you're commuting or working remotely. The internet infrastructure is adequate but not robust. Fiber isn't widespread. If your remote job depends on flawless connectivity, confirm availability before you commit. The schools rank below state averages. Crime rates are slightly above the state average, primarily property crime driven by economic desperation. It's not dangerous in any dramatic sense, but it's also not the idyllic small-town safety fantasy people imagine when they flee the city. One Reddit user described Chiefland perfectly. It's a town that exists so you can leave it and go somewhere prettier. And that's not entirely unfair. The springs are 15 minutes away. The river is 20 minutes away. Chiefland itself is gas stations, chain stores, and residential residential streets that look like every other Florida small town that never got a tourist boom. Picture this. Saturday morning, you're paddling the Suwannee River. Water so clear you can count the scales on the bass below you. Cypress trees dripping Spanish moss. Not another soul for miles. Your house payment is $950 a month. Your commute to actual civilization is 45 minutes. Your commute to this, 12 minutes, and you saw 3 deer on the way. Chiefland works if you're outdoorsy, remote, and willing to treat Gainesville as your metropolitan lifeline. It doesn't work if you need job options, social infrastructure, or anything resembling urban convenience. And if Chiefland felt like isolation with a nature cheat code, Lake Placid looked at that and said, "Hold my paintbrush, we're making isolation artistic." Number 5, Lake Placid, the Mural City. We're heading south now, deep into Central Florida, into a town that decided if it couldn't attract tourists with beaches or theme parks, it would just paint itself interesting. Lake Placid, population 2,400, has more than 47 outdoor murals covering downtown buildings, grain silos, and any flat surface the town could legally access. It's quirky, deliberate, and a little desperate in the way small towns get when they're trying to create an identity that justifies their existence. The median home price in Lake Placid is $195,000. That's what a year and a half of rent costs in Tampa, except this comes with 27 lakes, 47 murals, and a property deed instead of a security deposit you'll never see again. According to Zillow, the market here moves slightly faster than Chiefland or Palatka, average 62 days on market, but that's still slow by Florida standards. It tells you demand exists, just not urgently. Lake Placid sits in Highlands County, roughly equidistant between Florida's coasts and equally far from anything that matters economically. The nearest real city is Sebring, 15 minutes away, which itself is a small town pretending to be a city because it hosts a car race once a year. If you need Tampa or Orlando, you're looking at 90 minutes minimum. If you need Miami, add another hour. Here's the economic reality. Lake Placid's economy runs on agriculture, citrus groves, cattle ranching, and a trickle of tourists who stumble upon the murals and spend $40 at a local diner before leaving. The median household income in Highlands County is $46,000, according to census data. That's survivable if your housing costs are low, catastrophic if you're trying to build wealth or save for anything beyond next month's bills. The cost of living runs about 12% below the Florida average, but that's offset by limited job options and wages that haven't kept pace with anywhere else in the state. If you're remote or retired, the math works. If you're trying to build a career here, you're looking at retail, healthcare, education, or agriculture. Nothing with significant upward mobility, nothing that competes with coastal salaries. The lakes are the real draw, not tourist lakes with jet skis and waterfront bars. Quiet lakes where you can fish for bass, kayak without seeing another person, and pretend you discovered old Florida before it became a real estate commodity. The problem is these lakes exist all over Central Florida. Lake Placid doesn't have a monopoly on lakefront access. What it has is affordability and murals. Fun fact, Lake Placid has more murals per capita than any town in Florida. They've got 47 murals for 2,400 people. That's one piece of public art for every 51 residents. For context, Wynwood in Miami has about 1 mural per 400 residents. Lake Placid is out-arting the state's most famous art district, and most people couldn't find it on a map if you gave them 3 guesses and a GPS. It's the kind of committed weirdness that makes you wonder, are they trying to attract tourists or just convince themselves they matter? According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report, Lake Placid's crime rate sits slightly below the state average. It's safe in the way small towns with limited economic opportunity are safe. Not much happens because not much is happening. The biggest crime risk is property theft and the occasional drug-related incident, symptoms of economic stagnation more than criminal enterprise. The schools rank near the state average. Not terrible, not impressive. If you've got kids, they'll get an education. If you're expecting competitive academics or robust extracurriculars, you'll be supplementing with resources from outside the district. Summer heat in Lake Placid doesn't visit. It moves in, pays rent, and refuses to leave until November. Inland Florida, no coastal breeze. Humidity so thick you could bottle it and sell it as soup. Stepping outside in July feels like being wrapped in a warm, wet blanket that's also somehow mad at you. Your air conditioning will run from April through October. Your electric bill will spike like you're cooling a warehouse. And you'll learn that affordable housing doesn't mean affordable living when Duke Energy is your most expensive relationship. Picture this: sunset over Lake June in winter, sky turning tangerine and violet, You're on a dock, fishing rod in hand, watching a great blue heron stalk the shallows. Your mortgage is $1,100 a month. The 30-foot mural of a Florida panther is visible from where you sit. You're either living your best life or having an extended existential crisis, and honestly, it might be both. Lake Placid works if you're choosing lifestyle over economics, if you can make money remotely, if you value quiet over opportunity. It doesn't work if you need income growth, social infrastructure, or the sense that your town is building towards something instead of just holding on. At least Lake Placid tried to differentiate itself. Our next stop didn't even bother with murals. It just bet everything on trails and lakes and hoped that was enough. Number 4. Inverness, the trailhead. Inverness sits in Citrus County, an hour north of Tampa, and it built its entire identity around one thing, the Withlacoochee State Trail, a 46-mile paved rail trail that cuts through Central Florida, bringing cyclists, hikers, and the occasional tourist looking for Florida nature without the crowds. The town positioned itself as the trail's hub, added some lake access, and called it a day. The median home price in Inverness is $210,000, slightly higher than the towns we've covered so far, but still affordable by Florida standards. According to Redfin, homes here sit on the market for an average of 54 days. Faster turnover than Palatka or Chiefland, which tells you demand exists. People are choosing Inverness deliberately, not just stumbling into it because it's cheap. Here's what's actually happening. Inverness caught spillover from Tampa's explosive growth. Not enough to transform the town, but enough to stabilize it. Remote workers, early retirees, people fleeing Tampa's $400,000 starter homes discovered they could buy actual houses with land in Inverness and still be close enough to the city for weekend trips or occasional office visits. It's not a boom. It's a trickle of interest that keeps the market from stagnating completely. The town sits on a chain of lakes, Henderson, Sala Apopka, offering kayaking, fishing, and waterfront access without the premium prices of coastal markets. It's the same pitch as Lake Placid, except Inverness has better proximity to economic opportunity. Tampa is an hour away. Ocala is 40 minutes north. If you need work, medical care, shopping beyond Walmart, you're not trapped. The cost of living in Citrus County runs about 8% below the Florida average, according to economic data. Not as cheap as the deeply rural towns we've covered, but still manageable. The trade-off is you're getting closer to actual infrastructure. Inverness has a regional hospital, chain stores, restaurants that stay open past 7 p.m. It's still small-town Florida, but it's functional small-town Florida. Employment options are better here than Chiefland or Lake Placid, but that's a low bar. Healthcare, retail, service industry, some light manufacturing. The median household income in Citrus County is $48,000 per census data. That's still 25% below the Florida median, but it's not the economic desert of deeper rural markets. The Withlacoochee Trail is legitimately great if you're into outdoor recreation. Paved, well-maintained, shaded by oak canopies. You can bike from Inverness to Dunalon without seeing a car. On weekends, the trail gets moderate traffic. Cyclists from Tampa, retirees on morning walks, families with kids. It's active without being crowded, the sweet spot for outdoor access. The lakes offer the standard Central Florida experience. Bass fishing, kayaking, alligator sunning on the banks. Nothing Instagram worthy, but if you grew up fishing ponds in the South, it'll feel like home. One local described it as Florida before Florida got commercialized, which is code for we're not special, but we're authentic. Crime rates in Inverness track slightly above the state average, primarily property crime. According to local law enforcement data, most incidents are theft, burglary, drug-related. It's not dangerous in any systematic way, but it's also not the crime-free rural paradise people imagine when they leave the city. The schools in Citrus County rank below state averages. If you've got kids and care about academic performance, you're looking at supplemental education or private school options in nearby communities. The district isn't failing, but it's not competing with suburban Tampa or Gainesville either. Summer heat here is brutal. Inland, humid, no breeze. You'll need functional AC and the budget to run it 6 months a year. Winters are mild, occasionally dipping into the 40s, which counts as cold in Florida terms. Hurricane risk is lower than coastal markets, but you're still evacuating if a Cat 3 or higher aims for Tampa Bay. Picture this. Dawn on the Withlacoochee Trail, sun filtering through live oak canopy, cardinals calling, smell of dew on warm pavement. You pass 3 other cyclists, exchange exchange the universal morning nod. Your house is a 10-minute bike ride from this trail. Your mortgage is $1,250. Tampa is an hour away when you need it, which you will. The question is just how often before close enough becomes too far. Inverness works if you want outdoor access, moderate affordability, and proximity to Tampa without living in Tampa. It doesn't work if you need robust employment, top-tier schools, or the sense that your town has an identity beyond being a trail stop. At least in Inverness, your biggest weather worry was summer heat. Port St. Joe is about to introduce you to weather that has a lawyer and a publicist. Number 3. Port St. Joe, the forgotten Panhandle Beach. Port St. Joe sits on the Gulf Coast in the Florida Panhandle, about 40 miles southeast of Panama City Beach. And here's the pitch: white sand beaches, turquoise water, actual Gulf access, and a median home price of $285,000. That's expensive by the standards of this countdown, but it's a steal compared to Destin, $550,000, 30A, $900,000 plus, or anywhere tourists have heard of. You're thinking, finally, an actual beach town I can afford. And then you talk to an insurance agent, $6,000 to $10,000 annually for wind and flood coverage. That's $500 to $800 per month just for insurance. Before your mortgage, before taxes, before the therapy sessions you'll need watching hurricane models from June to November. That $285,000 house. Your real monthly cost is competing with a $450,000 home in a market that won't try to kill you twice a decade. Welcome to Affordable Beach Living, Florida edition. Here's why the insurance is catastrophic. Port St. Joe sits in Hurricane Alley. Not theoretical risk, actual, documented, end-of-the-world risk. Hurricane Michael hit in 2018 as a Category 5, obliterating Mexico Beach 20 miles east and devastating Port St. Joe. Entire neighborhoods were leveled. Infrastructure was destroyed. The town rebuilt, but the psychological and financial scars remain. The catch is simple. Port St. Joe got forgotten. When tourists flocked to the Panhandle, they hit Destin, Seaside, Rosemary Beach, the branded destinations with marketing budgets and Instagram aesthetics. Port St. Joe never got the hype machine, never attracted the developers who turned beach towns into luxury condo farms. What remains is a working-class fishing town with Gulf beaches that rival the famous spots, except nobody's paying attention. According to Zillow, homes in Port St. Joe sit on the market for an average of 98 days. That's slow for beachfront Florida, where coastal properties usually move fast. It tells you demand is tepid, buyers are cautious, and sellers can't command premium prices despite Gulf access. The reason is risk that everyone can see and no one can ignore. The cost of living in Gulf County runs about 5% below the Florida average, but that's misleading. Housing is cheaper. Everything else, groceries, gas, utilities, costs the same or more because the town is geographically isolated. The nearest Walmart is in Panama City, 45 minutes away. The nearest hospital with real capacity is also Panama City. If you need specialized medical care, advanced diagnostics, or emergency services beyond basic stabilization, you're evacuating to Tallahassee or Pensacola. Employment options are minimal. Tourism, fishing, retail, service industry. The median household income in Gulf County is $43,000 per census data. That's poverty adjacent in a state where cost of living keeps climbing. If you're not remote or retired, you're commuting to Panama City for work or scraping by on local wages that haven't kept pace with housing costs. The beaches, though, the beaches are legitimately beautiful. Cape San Blas, St. Joseph Peninsula State Park. These are some of the best beaches in Florida. Soft white sand, clear Gulf water, minimal crowds even in summer. You can walk the beach at sunrise and not see another person for miles. It's the Florida coastal fantasy, except the price is living in a town that gets leveled by hurricanes on a semi-regular basis. One local realtor told us off the record, "People buy here for the beach and leave after the first hurricane scare. We see it every season. They love it until June, then they watch the forecast and realize what they signed up for." Hurricane season runs June through November. That's half the year spent watching weather models and debating whether to evacuate. Crime rates in Port St. Joe are below the state average. It's a small town with limited economic activity and not much to steal. The bigger risk is natural disaster, which insurance treats as inevitable rather than possible. The schools in Gulf County rank among the lowest in Florida. If you've got school-age kids, you're looking at limited resources, below-average test scores, and a district struggling with funding and retention. Private school options don't exist locally. You're either accepting the public system or homeschooling. Picture this: sunrise on Cape San Blas, white sand, Gulf water like glass, pelicans bombing for mullet. You're holding coffee, watching the sky turn gold. Your house is a 5-minute drive from this. Your insurance bill is $680 a month, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you're already checking the 10-day forecast. Paradise has terms and conditions, and you're reading them every morning with your coffee. Port St. Joe works if you're willing to gamble on hurricanes, if you can afford catastrophic insurance, if you value Gulf access over economic stability and infrastructure. It doesn't work if you need job security, quality schools, or the ability to sleep during hurricane season. Port St. Joe asked you to gamble on hurricanes. Crescent City doesn't even offer you that much drama, just slow, quiet, beautiful economic surrender. Number 2, Crescent City, the Lake Crescent Secret. Crescent City sits in Putnam County, about 40 miles south of Jacksonville on the western shore of Crescent Lake. And the first thing you need to understand is this: it's tiny. Population 1,500. Not a small town, a village, a community that exists because it existed before and nobody's bothered to shut it down. The median home price in Crescent City is $140,000. That's the lowest on this countdown. For that money, you're getting lakefront access, Spanish moss draping over oak trees, a town that looks like it was designed for a Southern Gothic novel, and an economy that flatlined sometime in the 1970s and never recovered. Crescent Lake is beautiful, a natural freshwater lake, 15,960 acres, known for bass fishing and cypress-lined shores. It's the kind of water that draws outdoors enthusiasts and people looking for old Florida before it became a real estate commodity. The problem is, there's no infrastructure around it. Crescent City never developed, never attracted investment, never built the tourism apparatus that turns natural beauty into economic sustainability. According to census data, Crescent City's population has declined 8% over the past decade. People are leaving, not arriving. The median household income is $32,000, which is catastrophically low even by rural Florida standards. That's not affordable living territory. That's poverty. Employment options are nearly non-existent. There's a Dollar General, a few gas stations, maybe a local diner that opens inconsistently. The Dollar General is the closest thing Crescent City has to a department store, which tells you everything you need to know about retail options. They've got 3 aisles of chips, 1 aisle of hope, and a freezer section that's seen better days. The nearest Publix is in Palatka. The nearest Target might as well be on Mars. If you need something that isn't canned, frozen, or sold in a gas station, you're driving. And you're planning that drive like it's a mission to resupply an outpost. If you need a job, you're commuting to Palatka, 20 minutes, Gainesville, 45 minutes, or Jacksonville, an hour. The town itself offers nothing beyond subsistence level retail and service work. The cost of living runs about 22% below the Florida average per economic data, but that's because there's nothing to spend money on. You save on housing and lose on opportunity, income potential, and access to basic services. The nearest hospital is in Palatka. The nearest real shopping is Gainesville. The nearest anything is somewhere else. Zillow data shows homes sitting on the market for an average of 112 days. That's not a market. That's a stagnant pool where sellers hope anyone will take the property off their hands. When homes do sell, they sell to retirees looking for absolute isolation, or investors gambling on future lakefront development that shows no signs of materializing. Crime rates in Crescent City are slightly above the state average, driven primarily by property crime and drug-related incidents. It's not violent crime. It's the kind of crime that emerges when economic opportunity disappears and desperation fills the gap. Theft, burglary, meth-related arrests. The police department is understaffed and under-resourced because the town can't afford better. Crescent City sits in Putnam County, about 40 miles south of Jacksonville on the western shore of Crescent Lake. And the first thing you need to understand is this: it's tiny. Population 1,500. Not a small town, a village, a community that exists because it existed before and nobody's bothered to shut it down. The median home price in Crescent City is $140,000. That's the lowest on this countdown. For that money, you're getting lakefront access, Spanish moss draping over oak trees, a town that looks like it was was designed for a Southern Gothic novel and an economy that flatlined sometime in the 1970s and never recovered. Crescent Lake is beautiful, a natural freshwater lake, 15,960 acres, known for bass fishing and cypress-lined shores. It's the kind of water that draws outdoors enthusiasts and people looking for old Florida before it became a real estate commodity. The problem is, there's no infrastructure around it. Crescent City never developed, never attracted investment, never built the tourism apparatus that turns natural beauty into economic sustainability. According to census data, Crescent City's population has declined 8% over the past decade. People are leaving, not arriving. The median household income is $32,000, which is catastrophically low even by rural Florida standards. That's not affordable living territory. That's poverty. Employment options are nearly non-existent. There's a Dollar General, a few gas stations, maybe a local diner that opens inconsistently. The Dollar General is the closest thing Crescent City has to a department store, which tells you everything you need to know about retail options. They've got 3 aisles of chips, 1 aisle of hope, and a freezer section that's seen better days. The nearest Publix is in Palatka. The nearest Target might as well be on Mars. If you need something that isn't canned, frozen, or sold in a gas station, you're driving. And you're planning that drive like it's a mission to resupply an outpost. If you need a job, you're commuting to Palatka, 20 minutes. Gainesville, 45 minutes. Or Jacksonville, an hour. The town itself offers nothing beyond subsistence level retail and service work. The cost of living runs about 22% below the Florida average per economic data, but that's because there's nothing to spend money on. You save on housing and lose on opportunity, income potential, and access to basic services. The nearest hospital is in Palatka. The nearest real shopping is Gainesville. The nearest anything is somewhere else. Zillow data shows homes sitting on the market for an average of 112 days. That's not a market. That's a stagnant pool where sellers hope anyone will take the property off their hands. When homes do sell, they sell to retirees looking for absolute isolation or investors gambling on future lakefront development that shows no signs of materializing. Crime rates in Crescent City are slightly above the state average, driven primarily by property crime and drug-related incidents. It's not violent crime. It's the kind of crime that emerges when economic opportunity disappears and desperation fills the gap. Theft, burglary, meth-related arrests. The police department is understaffed and under-resourced because the town can't afford better. Number 1. Steinhatchee, the end of the road. Steinhatchee sits at the mouth of the Steinhatchee River, where it empties into the Gulf of Mexico, roughly 2 hours south of Tallahassee and 2 hours west of Gainesville, which means it's 2 hours from anywhere that matters. Population 1,200, no chain stores, no traffic lights. Spotty cell service. This is the end of the road, literally and metaphorically. The median home price in Steinhatchee is $225,000, which seems high for a town this remote until you realize you're paying for Gulf access and a fishing village that never sold out. This is old Florida in its purest form. Commercial fishing boats, scallop season, mullet festivals, and a community that doesn't care what the rest of the state is doing because they're too busy living like it's still 1985. According to Zillow, homes here sit on the market for an average of 71 days, faster than most of the towns on this countdown. That tells you something crucial. People are choosing Steinhatchee deliberately, not because it's cheap, not because they're desperate, because they want what Steinhatchee offers and they're willing to accept the trade-offs. Here's what you're trading. Steinhatchee has no major grocery chains, no Publix, no Winn-Dixie, no Walmart. You're shopping at small local markets with limited selection and higher prices. The nearest Walmart is in Perry, 35 minutes away. Fun fact, Steinhatchee doesn't have a single chain restaurant, not one. No McDonald's, no Subway, not even a Dairy Queen. If you're homesick for corporate consistency, the nearest Golden Arches is 35 minutes away in Perry. What Steinhatchee does have is 3 seafood shacks that all claim to have the best grouper sandwich in Florida. And honestly, they might all be right. When your competition is each other and not a franchise manual, quality gets weird in the best way. The nearest hospital with real capacity is in Gainesville, 2 hours away. If you have a medical emergency, you're either stabilizing at the small local clinic and evacuating, or you're hoping the helicopter gets there in time. Employment in Steinhatchee revolves around fishing, tourism, and service industry. Commercial scallop season brings a surge of visitors every summer. Sport fishing charters run year-round. A handful of restaurants and fish markets cater to tourists and locals. If you're not involved in fishing or tourism, your job options are nearly zero. The median household income in Taylor County is $41,000 per census data. You're living on fishing income, remote work, or retirement savings. The cost of living runs about 10% below the Florida average, but that's offset by distance costs. Everything requires driving, gas, time, the mental load of planning every trip to civilization like an expedition. You don't run to the store for milk, you stock up because the nearest real shopping is an hour away. But here's what you get. The Steinhatchee River is pristine. Gulf access without the Panama City tourist insanity. Scalloping in the summer, redfish and trout fishing year-round. A community where people still know their neighbors. Where the biggest social events are mullet festivals and fish fries. Where nobody's trying to turn the town into a luxury resort because there's no money in it. One local fisher told us, people come here thinking it's a vacation. Then they realize it's a lifestyle and most of them leave. The ones who stay get it. You're not here for convenience. You're here because you're done with convenience. Crime rates in Steinhatchee are below the state average. There's nothing to steal and nobody to steal from. The community polices itself informally. If something goes wrong, your neighbors know before the sheriff does. The schools are part of Taylor County, which ranks among the lowest in Florida. If you've got school-age kids, you're either accepting a below-average education or you're homeschooling. High school students who want college prep or advanced courses are driving to Perry or looking at online options. Hurricane risk is real. Steinhatchee is Gulf-facing, low-lying, and vulnerable. Insurance costs are climbing. When hurricanes threaten, you evacuate or you ride it out, and emergency services are limited. The 2021 season saw multiple close calls. The 2023 season brought flooding and wind damage. Living here means accepting that nature can destroy everything you own with minimal warning. Cell service is spotty, internet is satellite or spotty DSL. If you're remote working, confirm connectivity before you commit. Power outages happen regularly. The grid is old, the infrastructure is minimal, and storms knock out electricity for days. Picture this. Dawn at the Steinhatchee River mouth. You're on a boat heading out for scallop season. Water like glass. Dolphins hunting mullet in formation. Sun rising over the Gulf, turning everything gold. Your house payment is $1,400. Your cell service cut out 5 minutes ago. Your nearest hospital is 2 hours away. You're either the freest person you know or you've made a catastrophic mistake and you won't find out which until something goes wrong. Steinhatchee works if you're done with modern life, if you can sustain income remotely or through fishing, if you value community and nature over convenience and infrastructure. It doesn't work if you need medical access, job options, reliable internet, or the certainty that help is nearby when things go wrong. This is the town tourists never talk about, because tourists don't make it this far, and the people who live here wouldn't want them anyway. 7 towns. 7 versions of affordable Florida that the tourism boards pretend don't exist. From Palatka's River Victorian dignity to Steinhatchee's off-grid fishing village, we've mapped the Florida dream that doesn't require a trust fund or a willingness to live in a beige HOA box. Here's the pattern. Affordability in Florida comes with distance. Distance from jobs, distance from hospitals, distance from the infrastructure that makes modern life convenient. The cheaper the town, the more you're trading economic opportunity for natural beauty, career potential for waterfront access, convenience for peace. These towns aren't collapsing. They're not dying. They're just existing outside the boom, holding on to versions of Florida that predate the real estate casino and the influencer industrial complex. They're still possible if you're willing to redefine what possible means. Who wins in these markets? Remote workers with guaranteed income, retirees with pensions and savings, people who value fishing over career ladders, silence over nightlife, community over anonymity, people who can make money anywhere and choose to make it somewhere beautiful and cheap. Who loses? Anyone who needs local employment, families who care about school quality, people who require medical access or can't afford catastrophic insurance, anyone who thinks they can have coastal Florida without accepting coastal Florida risk. The Florida dream still exists. It just doesn't look like the brochure anymore. It looks like Victorian homes on forgotten rivers, murals in towns nobody visits, lakes with no jet skis, beaches with hurricane insurance premiums that'll make you cry, and fishing villages at the end of roads that don't lead anywhere else. If this resonated, hit that like button. If you've lived in any of these towns or you're considering the move, drop a comment and tell us what we missed. Subscribe if you want more deep dives into the real estate nobody else is covering. Share this with anyone who's tired of being priced out of paradise and ready to redefine what paradise actually costs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.